Welcome back into the Daily Dose. I'm Jeff Hansen. The show's brought to you by Give'emHellBrigham.com and by Feastbox.com. Check out Feastbox.com for something new. You know about the restaurant. You know about the Cougar Feast, the box with tailgate food delivered directly to your door. Feastbox.com. You can now get really affordable. The chicken is as cheap as $2.75 a serving. Really affordable meat, just the meat delivered right to your door. It's delicious. You can do whatever you want with it. No sides, no swag, no frill, just the meat itself. Check it out at feastbox.com. Apologies, there was no show yesterday. I was a little under the weather. I've been fighting this cold for a couple of weeks. It's been brutal, and it got the best of me yesterday. But I'm back today. We're here. BYU is still playing Arkansas on Saturday. This is a huge game for the Cougars. There's no question about it. And there's a lot to like about where BYU is at. There's a lot of concerns. There's no question about it. BYU's got to figure out a rushing game. The offensive line needs to be a little bit better. What's going on with the safeties in the secondary? There's question marks, to be sure. But there's a lot to like about where BYU is at as well. BYU was pretty abysmal in week one. I think we can all safely agree on that. And the strides that they made in week two were pretty apparent. That's good. That's progress. Forget the opponents. Forget the quality of SUU versus Sam Houston. Just watch the way BYU executed. BYU was a much crisper, cleaner, more well-coached, more disciplined team in week two, and that led to better results. Talent wasn't the question in week one. There was never this idea that BYU didn't have the talent to compete. It was, are they going to get these assignments right? Are they going to be able to execute this defense, this offense right? They showed that they can execute at a significantly higher level in week two, and I'm expecting a similar jump into week three. And on the Arkansas side of the ball, I love KJ Jefferson. He's one of my favorite players in the country. For my dollar, he's the best quarterback in the SEC, and he's a real tough, challenging threat for BYU to figure out. Aside from KJ Jefferson, I think BYU matches up better than people maybe want to give the Cougars credit for. So yeah, I think this game is going to be close. If BYU is going to win this game, there's a handful of guys that have to step up and play like the leaders that they are. And that's who I really want to talk about today. First and foremost, Ben Bywater. Ben Bywater is very good, guys. He's very, very good. And I think we have a tendency to think that Bywater maybe isn't as good as he is because of the scheme he's been playing in for the last couple of years. BYU's linebackers were on their heels. They were far from the line of scrimmage. They weren't well coached. The design wasn't great for linebackers. It was tough to be a linebacker in BYU's defense. This year, Jay Hill, Justin Enna, they've got those linebackers playing so much more aggressively. They are all over the field. They are active. They are fitting into gaps, and they are meeting people in those gaps, and they are punishing ball carriers. They are doing exceptionally well at the linebacker position, and this is a game where Ben Bywater, I think, needs to give himself some redemption on behalf of the entire linebacker unit. KJ Jefferson torched BYU a year ago, completed nearly 75% of his passes. He accounted for 399 total yards and 5 touchdowns. I mean, the guy was unreal, and the linebackers just sort of sat back on their heels and made it happen. This is a game where I hope Ben Bywater shows some pride, takes it personal, what Jefferson did last year, and goes out of his way to represent the entire defense, the entire linebacker unit, and say, no, last year was last year. We're a completely different team this year. If Ben Bywater and AJ Vonquichan and Max Tooley, that entire linebacker unit, Bywater represents, he's the tribute for all of them. If Ben Bywater can play well and he can slow down Jefferson, I don't think you have to stop him. You don't have to contain him. You don't have to hold him under 200 yards. If they can just slow down KJ Jefferson, force him into maybe one mistake or prevent him from getting 1 or 2 first downs with his legs, the entire game last year would have been different. It was 38-35 in the third quarter. If they get a couple of extra stops last year, it's a different game against Arkansas. This year, if they can get a couple of extra stops, it's maybe a different game from the beginning. So I'm looking at Ben Bywater to have a huge game. He's got to have a huge game if BYU is going to win. Number 2, I've got Connor Pay. Connor Pay switched over to right guard, doing what's best for the team. I think he's an NFL center. He's got that capability, and I think he could stick in the league as a guard as well. But he's been playing center for 2.5 years. Hasn't played guard for a while. Paul Miley comes in. Connor Pay says, hey, kick me out to guard. It's the best for the team. Great. his play in the first couple of weeks has been up and down. He's had some moments where he's been great, and then he's had some moments where he got beat on his reps, and I think he'd be the first one to tell you that. Connor Pay's got to play better this week against Arkansas because that running game has got to find some groove. And when I look at Connor Pay, Kingsley Suamataia, maybe he is the most talented offensive lineman. Paul Maile, maybe he's the senior kind of captain at the center who's calling everything out. I mean, maybe that's his role. But when I look at Connor Pay, I think he's the leader in that room. He's been around the longest. I think he's naturally a leader. You hear him talk. The guy sounds like a coach. The guy sounds like somebody who commands respect as soon as he walks into a room. Connor Pay, kind of like Ben Bywater, is my representation of the entire offensive line. As Connor Pay plays, so will the rest of the offensive line group. I really believe that. I think Connor Pay, that's the kind of leadership style he has, and that's the kind of influence he has in that offensive line room. So as he plays better, as he gets more dominant, and as he finds his groove, I think Connor Pay and the rest of the offensive line will play better. If he struggles and that offensive line struggles, it's going to be a long night. I mean, it will. BYU has to find a running game, no question about it. They don't have to go for 300 yards. They don't even have to go for 200 yards, but they have to play well enough that they're a consistent threat on the ground. And Connor Pay, I think it plays a huge role. I'm looking for him to have a big bounce back week this week. The third one is probably pretty obvious, and Keaton SLOVAS. BYU's quarterback's got to play well. This team's going to throw the ball. That's just who they are, and they proved that they can do that last week. Keaton SLOVAS still has an arm that can make every throw on the field. He's still accurate. He still puts a ton of zip on the ball. He's great, and he's in an offense where he seems comfortable. That's great news for BYU. This is a tougher test than Southern Utah. You may be able to throw for 4 scores and 350 some odd yards against Southern Utah, but can he do it against Arkansas? Can these receivers create enough space against these Arkansas defensive backs? Is SLOVAS going to be able to anticipate well enough that he's throwing guys open? Because that's what you have to do when you're playing an SEC team. Guys aren't just going to magically appear open, waving their hands, throwing the ball, or waiting for the ball to be thrown to them. You've got to anticipate, and you've got to throw guys open. And I think that's one of Keaton SLOVAS' best skill sets, but I think he's going to have to put it on display against Arkansas. In my opinion, if BYU is going to win, he's got to go for at least 250, maybe 300 yards. He's got to protect the football. There can't be any interceptions. That's maybe the biggest key for Keaton SLOVAS. He cannot turn the ball over, and that's kind of been the thorn in his side over his career these last few years, is he does have a tendency to make some difficult decisions, tries to force some balls into windows that maybe he shouldn't throw into when the competition gets really tight. That's what I think Arkansas will do. They'll make him anticipate. They're going to make him try to make him force the ball into things, and then they're going to pounce on that and try to turn the ball over. Keaton SLOVAS has to rise above that, protect the ball, push the ball downfield. He's got the skill set to be great. I just want to see it against a P5 team before I start, banging my fists on the table that Keaton SLOVAS is back and that he is the real deal. Another offensive player, Isaac Rex. I think he's the X factor for BYU in this game. If BYU can get the tight end going against Arkansas, I believe it will open up a lot of other things for the BYU offense. The running game has to run. The receivers have to get open. But if Isaac Rex can be the threat that he is, if he can be the threat that he was against Southern Utah, if he can be the threat that he's been throughout his career, if he pulls in 4 or 5 catches, I'm not worried about touchdowns per se, but if he pulls in 4 or 5 catches for 3 or 4 first downs, and he's a big part of BYU moving the chains and extending drives, then that defense is going to have to account for him, and that will open things up downfield. And that's what Aaron Roderick, Keaton SLOVAS, that's what they love to do. They love chunk plays downfield, and Isaac Rex is a huge catalyst towards enabling those chunk plays downfield. And finally, this isn't a surprise. Tyler Batty. We're looking at the biggest names on BYU's roster. Tyler Batty's got to have a big game. He has to, maybe not necessarily have a bunch of sacks, but he has to make KJ Jefferson uncomfortable. If he can't make it KJ Jefferson uncomfortable, Jefferson will pick BYU apart. He just will. Even without Rocket Sanders playing, AJ Green is a very dynamic running back. I love Isaac Tesla as a wide receiver for Arkansas. Jefferson has weapons, and he will make BYU's life miserable if he has time to sit into the pocket and diagnose and dissect a defense. Tyler Batty is the guy who can disrupt that. Again, he represents the entire defensive line. The defensive line needs to play well, but Tyler Batty especially, because of his skill set, because of his talent, he's the guy that I'm looking at that if he is creating pressure, he is creating havoc on his own, then the team gets better as a result. You could throw Isaiah Banya into this mix as well. I don't think Isaiah Banya is the pass rusher that Tyler Batty is, certainly not the pass rusher that we all hoped he would be coming in from Boise State, but he's done a phenomenal job setting the edge. He and Blake Mangelson have played really, really well, and they have set the edge very, very well and enabled linebackers to come off the edge and make plays. They've forced the running game out wide because they are controlling the edge. As long as Banya, Mangelson, as long as they continue to do that, then I'm going to look to Tyler Batty to be the guy who creates the pressure in the backfield. If you get more from a Banya and a Mangelson and they get into the backfield as well, phenomenal. That's fantastic. That means the whole defense is going well. But in my opinion, this starts with Tyler Batty. He's the guy who's got to play well. So there you go. I mean, I'm not really breaking any news when I say that maybe the five biggest names on the roster need to have 5 big games in order for BYU to beat Arkansas. But they do. I mean, that's just the reality of it. These 5 guys, if they can play well, then BYU is going to have a shot in the fourth quarter. And if BYU has a shot in the fourth quarter, I like the senior leadership. I like this coaching staff. Kalani Sitake, he's got a better than 500 record on the road against Power 5 teams in his BYU career. I mean, I know that isn't saying a ton, better than 500. He's only 1 or 2 games above 500. It's not like he's undefeated. But when you consider that BYU's been an independent program, they've been up and down. They had their 2016, 2017 debacle on offense. I mean, there's been a lot of factors. And going up against Power 5 teams throughout the independent era was always the measuring stick of, is BYU for real? To be better than 500 on the road against Power 5 teams, that's a big deal. That means that BYU's doing well. Now they are a Power 5 program. Here they are representing an entire conference on the road in SEC country, looking for revenge after a blowout loss last year at home to Arkansas. These are the kinds of games where I have a hard time betting against Kalani Sitake. I don't feel super confident in saying, hey, BYU's going to come out and they're going to win this game. Go lay down all your money at the casino. That's not what I'm saying. But these are the kinds of games where Kalani Sitake has had success throughout his career. You think Wisconsin, you think Baylor, Michigan State. These are the kinds of games where I really like what Kalani Sitake does in the locker room. He gets his teams up and he gets his teams ready to play. It's going to be a lot of fun. Appreciate you guys tuning in, checking us out here at the Daily Dose. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And until next time, give them hell.